pay was okay, but it was really about the experience. And that's what, real estate and learning real estate really gets down to just getting going and taking the actions, where you're going to learn.
Welcome to Multifamily Insights. I'm your host, John Casman, and I want to thank you for joining us for another great episode. Listen, if you're enjoying the show, do me a quick little favor and leave us a rating and review. We want to get your honest feedback on the show and help other people get the same benefits that you're getting from being an avid listener. Speaking of being an avid listener, if you haven't done so already, make sure you hit that subscribe button so you don't miss an episode. Now, we've got a great show today. We're going to be talking to Alan Siebenaler. They say you're the average of the 5 people you spend the most time with. So if you want to grow as a multifamily investor, you have to spend more time with other multifamily investors. And an easy way to do that is to join our apartment investing mastermind group today. Just go to casmancapital.com and click on the mastermind button. Now, as a part of this group, you'll get access to expert trainings, group coaching calls, industry news and updates, as well as all of our webinars and workshops, including our 3-hour workshop on raising capital. Again, if you want to be around other multifamily investors that can help you scale your portfolio today and grow your network, make sure you're a part of the Apartment Investing Mastermind. Just go to casmancapital.com and click on the mastermind button today. Alan Siebenaler has been investing in real estate for over 22 years. Now, he's invested in 9 different states, and he's made singles transactions 7-figure profits starting back in 2001 with $3,000. Now, he has spent 10 years in the real estate education space, speaking on a national stage for Keller Williams Realty and for Dean Graziosi, a multiple New York Times bestselling author, entrepreneur, and investor, not to mention that Alan has led 3-day real estate boot camps across the United States. Let's welcome to the show, Alan Siebenaler.
What's happening? Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Hey, Alan, I went over your bio at a very high level. Why don't you take 2 minutes and fill in some of those gaps?
Yeah, absolutely. I first got into real estate investing because I wanted some financial control, some financial freedom, you could say. My dad worked his way up in a factory his whole life. And then when that national company got bought up by another one, he got laid off. And, he had no college education, and it was a recession at the time. And so him and I got our real estate license together. I just graduated from high school and I was interested in real estate. I had a friend whose dad was both a agent and an investor, and I did an internship, and I just got hooked. And so I have been doing real estate, started with the intention of becoming an investor. So part of that was reading the book Rich Dad Poor Dad, and I got my real estate license and started in commercial real estate because I wanted to work for investors and just learn everything I could. And at the same time, my wife and I were living in Santa Monica, California, which is the beach side of Los Angeles, and it's really an expensive place to live. So we got reduced rent by living in an apartment building and managing that building for the building owners. And it was great experience because we were showing units, we were learning about leasing, we were running the maintenance and renovation crews. And so it was huge experience for us on our real estate journey. Then started with our first fixer, and just over the years traded up, did 1031 exchanges into larger multifamily properties, moved that money into the Midwest and bought multifamily properties in various states. And that was our journey. All the while I was also working as a real estate agent here in California, and eventually got to the point where people started inviting me to help them build their portfolios or get started on their portfolios or how to scale their portfolios in a wise way. And that's been a lot of fun. That's my journey in a nutshell.
Alan, great stuff so far, man. You talked about, basically seeing the rich dad, poor dad model play out real time with your dad, having this interest in real estate, having a friend whose dad was in real estate. You and your dad end up getting licensed at the same time, right? To make that career transition. And then you said, you started off, managing a property in Santa Monica and getting some reduced rent for doing that. buying your first property, trading that up through 1031 exchanges, eventually, expanding into the Midwest and then helping other people scale their portfolio. Hey, real quick, I want to go back to what you said about, managing that apartment for other owners. What was that process like? I mean, because at that point you didn't have any experience. So how did you
Right.
kind of gain the trust of this owner to say, hey, we'll take it over, we'll manage it for you in exchange
Yeah.
for reduced rent?
Yeah. I shot a YouTube video telling that story because a lot of people are interested in it. They're like, wait, how do I manage an apartment building along the beach? Right. And we just responded to an ad that said, hey, they were looking for a property manager. You didn't have to have experience. The pay wasn't that great, to be honest, but the experience was where the gold was, right? So this was an apartment. They gave us, maybe I can't remember, $600 off the monthly rent. And that was enough where it became very affordable for us to live 6 blocks from the beach and in a nice apartment building, in a renovated apartment, and then get the experience directly for the owners of the building, which were the investors. They were training us as we went on how to lease apartments, how to manage their maintenance crews and the renovation crews. They were hands-on owners, but they gave us a lot of responsibility where we got to learn the ropes. And then that eventually led to us, finding other jobs like that where we got absolutely free rent. We started managing some bigger portfolios and lived in the building and just got free rent because we were experienced at that point. But it just started with us just finding a situation where, the pay was okay, but it was really about the experience. And that's what, real estate and learning real estate really gets down to, just getting going and taking the actions, where you're going to learn, where someone's mentoring you, or you're shadowing someone, and you give yourself grace to make mistakes, but you're actually taking those actions that you'll learn from and grow in and build experience.
I love what you just said there because that's our first real big insight, right? And it's easy to look at it from the younger person's standpoint, right? Younger you, hey, I don't have that much experience. Here's a great way to get it, right? I'm just going to give them my services. But for most of our listeners who are maybe a little bit more older, a little bit more experienced, it's a great idea if you've got properties that are a headache and maybe it's not the right time to sell and you don't want to manage them yourselves. Do exactly what those owners did. Put an ad out there. Find
Yeah.
that young person who's hungry and
Yep.
scrappy and willing to learn, and cut a sweetheart deal with them and let them take on that. And you train them and you coach them up. But that's a
Yep.
great win-win because, to your point, to be a successful real estate investor, it comes down to having some experience, and you certainly have to have resources, capital, and things like that. But starting out, you have to have, the experience, and you were able
Yep.
to, leverage your time and get that experience and then trade that up into bigger assets where now you're getting free rent. And that is a great idea for a lot of people starting out. So whether you're, young and trying to get started, or you're a little bit older, have a portfolio, here's a great way to find that, particularly when it's hard finding, good employee and good staff, right? You're having a hard
Mhm.
time retaining good talent. Or maybe your portfolio is not big enough to bring on a third party management company. Again, here's another
Mhm.
little idea to maybe tap into someone who's young, hungry, and scrappy. You're still got to be
Yep.
involved and teach them and train them, but you can get some additional resources that may be beneficial. I
Yeah.
want to move along in your journey, right? So you kind of get started. You are, helping manage these properties for people. You get to the point where you're making your own investments and starting to 1031 that. Talk to me about that trajectory from making your first investment and then scaling that portfolio to the point where you can do multiple 1031s.
Yeah. I started with just a fixer, something that we could add value to. And we did that, and it was in a market, the coast being California, that you can grow an appreciation rapidly in an up market. And so we caught it at the right time, where it was starting to appreciate rapidly. And on top of that, we were adding value to it by renovating it. And the property had really good bones to it. It was a condo, even though I don't invest in condos anymore, but um, I'll just say, just because of HOAs, like I like to have full control. I'm not saying condos can work in some situations, but this was my first property, and all we could afford in that area was a condo, and it needed a lot of updating. I mean, it was on the inside, looked like 1970s, but it had really good layout to it. It had 2 balconies. It had a balcony off the living room, a balcony off the bedroom. It had a great complex with, pool and facilities and underground parking. Like, it was dialed in. And so as we renovated it, made it nicer, it increased the value. And then we eventually just rented it out, and it covered itself completely, which meant that tenant was now paying down the mortgage for us. We had a little bit of income coming in off of it. And then we rode that market up for 4 years. And actually it's about 5 years that we rode that market up. And then at that point, we were able to sell it at twice what we bought it for, and 1031 exchange into the Midwest, into Tulsa, Oklahoma at the time. And we bought a 12-unit fixer. So we sold 1 unit and bought 12, and did not pay the taxes because the gains went from that closing into an accommodator's account and then into the new property. So that was the start of that journey. And then we did, multiple exchanges like that over the years.
So you had this one property, fixer upper in this, HOA. So you got to deal with things like that, but you were able to fix it up, create some equity, create some value with the strategy you put in place. And then you did a 1031 exchange and bought a 12-unit in Tulsa. So my natural next question, did you move to Tulsa, or did you stay in beautiful, sunny Southern California?
Yeah, I stayed in sunny California.
All right. So how did you manage it then?
It was a crazy move. Like, to buy a 12-unit fixer in another state is a little bit insane now looking back at it, but I was just hungry. Like, I wanted the upside. I wanted to add value to the property. I wanted to make sure that I wasn't going to lose any money. So I bought it at a good price, and it was in a good location. So that those things worked in my favor. The things that were difficult were managing renovations from a distance. I mean, I'm managing renovations in my own neighborhood here right now, and it's a lot of work. There's a lot of details that go into that. And so that was really hard. And then finding the right team, going through and having to fire people that aren't working out, and get really the right team that you can trust, that do what they say they're going to do, that are honest. That takes some time. And that was a big learning curve, but we got there. We got a construction loan to be able to have funds to renovate as well. And then when we were done with the property, all the rents went up. And of course, when the rents go up, the value goes up of the property. And so we were able to capture that value add and that gain on the property.
Yeah. So you mentioned a couple of challenges, right? So managing the construction, the renovation, finding the right team. Those are two of the challenges you faced with this project being, across the country there. For someone who is, interested in investing out of state and maybe doing a fixer up or a plan very similar to what you did, what advice would you give them looking back?
Yeah, I think one of the biggest things, so investing out of state, you want to buy in as good of a location as possible. I know that's one of the most obvious things in real estate is location, location, location. But the thing is, it gets very tempting when you see these low prices in neighborhoods that are just a bit more, rough, to be honest. And I was picking up properties in some of those rough spots because the banks at the time were literally dumping the properties. I mean, I could buy some of them with my credit card. They were so cheap. And it's very, very tempting because you look at the numbers and you're like, wow, I can really add a ton of value here. And that's true. However, when it comes to the management of not just the renovation and protecting the property, but also then the tenant that moves into that property, it can become a really, really high drama situation. You can have literal violence going on in the neighborhood. You can have drive-bys happening. You can have tenants fleeing the property and leaving it vacant, and then it gets broken into and stuff gets damaged and stolen. And it can be really, really rough. So all those numbers you thought you were getting, you're not going to get. Whereas if you go into a much better location and you add value, you're going to get a really, really good demographic and a tenant base that's easier to manage from a distance.
Yeah, your point is don't be completely, consumed by that promising cash on cash return, that double digit 12, 15%, in place cash on cash return in some of these areas, especially if it's very rough, because when you factor in just the realities of managing assets in those areas, you're not going to see that return, right? So your
Yeah.
best bet if you're investing out of state is to find areas that are desirable where people want to live, make your life a little bit easier, and
Yeah.
actually be closer to those projections as opposed to not recognizing some of the things that may or could happen. I know you've had some challenges, right? We talked about before we hit record, we talked about some properties where you had some of the the issues you just mentioned, right? Whether it be gang activity and other things like that. Talk to us a little bit more about some of those challenges, and again, things that you would do looking back to mitigate those things moving forward.
Yeah. I'll tell you a situation where I actually had that sort of a challenge in a property that was in a good location. So it was a little bit of surprise that I had a gang move into a property that was a multifamily property in a nice neighborhood. And the way it went down is my property manager, who was the resident manager living in the building, because I was training up resident managers as well, he got hooked on meth. Really good guy, good kid, like learning, trustworthy, but he went through some crisis in his personal life and was at the wrong situation, the wrong time. And someone offered him, meth to get away and escape. And he took it and got hooked. And then the guys that were selling him the meth were involved in some gang operations, and they found out he was the property manager. He might have owed him some money. I don't know what happened, but basically they started moving into, as units became vacant in the building, they started moving into them, and he wasn't communicating with me that he'd leased the units. And so I could tell something was up, but I didn't live there. So I just knew something was going on and something was off. And then eventually his mom called me and she just said, "Hey, you need to know something about my son. Something's going on. He's hooked on meth and there's a gang that's moving into your building." And so I called the police, and the police said, "Well, there's only so much we can do. If they've moved in, you're going to have to go through the whole judicial system. You're going to have to evict them because they have rights as squatters." And I was like, "Oh, heck no. These guys have no rights." And so I figured out that I can hire an off-duty police officer, because one of my friends said, "Hey, I know a guy that's a police officer and he works off duty. Why don't you talk to him?" So I hired this guy, and it's awesome because he shows up in, uniform with a cop car out front. Even though he's off duty, he's still a police officer, right? And if anybody messes with him, the entire police force will back him up whether he's on duty or not. And so he shows up, and we just start hanging out at the property. We give the tenants notice that we're going to come in and do inspections, and we just make these guys miserable. Like we're inspecting, because we have every right to inspect their unit, especially if we suspect there's things going on. And so we give them the proper notice, we inspect, and then we just negotiated cash for keys, because they weren't having fun with that guy hanging around. It didn't take long. It literally took us 1 week, and we ruined the party. And I just said to them, I said, "Hey, with the officer there, anytime I went to the property, I had the guy with me. And I said, look, you know, we're going to give this money to a judge and they're going to evict you. Like, you don't have a case here, but I'd rather just honestly give the money to you and you be out by Friday. How does that sound?" And they're like, "You got a deal." So we just did cash for keys. And I was really safe about it. I had the officer with me at all times, and it worked out, but it was a lesson learned big time.
Couple of things, man, and just want to clarify a quick little point. You mentioned that whenever you went, you had the officer with you. Did you have to like relocate for a little bit, or did you plan an extended trip
Oh,
there to get this resolved, or what did that look like?
yeah, good question. I basically went out there for a week. Yeah, as soon as I got the news that there was a gang moving into our vacant units, I was booking a ticket to get out there, because I knew that it only takes one bad situation to ruin the whole building, right? I mean,
No, no.
if I've got, single moms or single ladies living in some of these apartments, and then all of a sudden there's a gang running operations out of another apartment, they're gonna move out. I'm gonna lose my best tenants if I don't act really quick. So yeah, I was on the next flight out, and then I was organizing things with the off-duty police officer that just to make sure I'd be safe under the situation, and just got on top of it fast.
Yeah, and not normally where I would take this conversation, but I find it very interesting that the property manager's mom called you because it tells me that there must have been some kind of relationship between you and her son where she felt the need to step in and let you know this was happening. Clearly, she was that she had no other, options, but also there was enough respect for you to say, "Hey, you better come check on your stuff because it's going to get real bad real fast." I mean,
Yes,
am I reading that correctly? That there seemed to be some other relationship there?
totally.
Okay.
Totally. And the story fortunately has a wonderful ending. He ended up checking into rehab. And then when I came back many months later to check on the property, I was still connected with him through Facebook. And I went and visited him in rehab, and he was doing great. And he's been sober to this day. So he was able to turn his life around, whereas, some of those situations with meth don't end well at all. But yeah, I think his mom knew that, that I actually didn't just care about the property, I cared about him as well. And, he was a great employee, like he did a good job. Just was in the wrong situation, a tough spot in his life. And, fortunately it had a good ending.
I think that's important. The reason I brought it up is, I mean, that story could have gone very different for you, right? If
Mm.
you didn't get that call when you got that call, and that came from the relationship, and it must have been enough where his mom was privy to it based on maybe her conversations with her son or whatever it is. But there was enough of an impact where she stepped in to call you and alert you that this was going on, because again, another week maybe, and this maybe has a completely different outcome. And I think as
Yeah.
owner operators, it's important for us to recognize that we're dealing with people. And even when people have these major crises happen in their lives, they're still people. And if we can remember that, you can get to a resolution that may be beneficial, may not be exactly what you want, but you can salvage the best out of the situation, as
Right.
opposed to, if you just operate by the letter of the law. I'm sure that could have went very different. If that guy didn't care about you, if his mom didn't care about you, you might have been reading about this in the papers, right? And then realizing, how far gone the project had gone. So really good points there. If we're looking for insights, there's a children's book. I forget the exact name of it, but I'm gonna start with Don't Try Meth, because if you try meth or you give your property manager meth, he may let a gang move into your apartment building, right? If you let a gang move into your apartment building, so but there's that book, and it kind of gave me that little nugget there. But great, I'm glad it all worked out for you there, and obviously some great lessons about what you can do from a person standpoint to take care of your people, take care of your team, and also check in on them. I mean, we all go through things, and recognizing that the person had a situation that could have ended much more worse for you and for that individual. So glad things are moving forward. Um, you do a lot of speaking now, right? You're a coach, you're a motivator, you're a speaker, you educate a lot of people. How did you get
Yeah.
into the speaking side of the business?
Yeah, I got into the speaking side when I was just doing deals to survive during the Great Recession. So, 2009 hit, and as a real estate agent, especially, I was doing a lot of commercial deals. Those deals stopped. Like commercial market, when the recession really kicked in, like they just stopped. So my income I took a over 50% pay cut immediately, and I had to reinvent myself. So what I did is I started raising capital, and started buying foreclosures. And then we'd take the foreclosures, we'd renovate them, add value to them, and sell them off. And that became, something that other people wanted to do. And so they'd say, well, hey, can you tell us more about that? And so then that led to me speaking, and then it led to me being invited to travel and do boot camps with Dean Graziosi and some other people. And so, yeah, it really just became something it's like that I was just doing to survive. And other people wanted to learn how to do it.
Yeah. So now you've spoken on multiple stages. You've done your own seminars and boot camps. Talk to me about kind of what speaking looks like for you and maybe some of your key highlights.
Yeah, I really enjoy it. So I enjoy helping if I can use what I've gone through, both the good, the victories, and the challenges, and the moments where I felt like I just failed or made a mistake. If I can take all of that and I can share it with someone else, and it can help them, and help them reach their goals, and they can learn from what I've gone through, there's something just rewarding in that. It's just a great way to make, if I can then get back and make a living off of doing it, it's fun for me. I really enjoy it. I don't want to separate myself from the actual practice of doing it, so I am very involved. I've got a big renovation going on right now, and I love staying in the trenches. I love staying active. I don't want to just talk about theories. I want to be out doing it as well. So I think balancing the two of those has been a lot of fun, and it brings a lot of value to people.
Yeah, and I think that's really important. You talked about, obviously speaking and educating people, that can be rewarding and it can be fulfilling on both sides of it. But you also want to stay rooted in the actual business. And I know some people don't, and they just focus on the speaking, and I'm not here to judge them, but I do think there's something important about being in the day-to-day, of the actual business, of talking to contractors, of watching prices go up and watching these bids go, and going from, trying to stalk your contractors to get them to bid on your project, to them calling you now to say, hey man, you got anything for me to work on? It's like, oh, I guess the market has shifted, huh? So, that's some real-time stuff that you don't get when you're just on the speaking tour. So really great insight. I appreciate you sharing a little bit more about that. If folks want to learn more about you or your business or some of the ways you can help, you got a lot of good information on your website, retireonincome.com. That's retireonincome.com. And then you're also pretty active on YouTube and some of the social media channels with Al Siebes. That's ALSIEBS, Al Siebes. So make sure you check out Al there. Right now, we are going to transition to our round of insights. Are you ready?
Ready.
All right. Give me a failure or an apparent failure that sets you up for later success.
Yeah, that's a good one. I bought land at the absolute peak of the market. So I bought land in 2007, just before the Great Recession. And the thing about land is it goes up very, very rapidly, or at least I should say it can go up very rapidly in an up market, especially as people are building and developing, and there's all this excitement about the future, right? Everyone's optimistic. So they look at a piece of land when the market's shooting up and they're like, wow, this is going to become something amazing, right? And then when the market shifts and the market goes down, land can tend to go down the fastest, because the opposite happens. You now look at land and you're like, oh, we can't do anything with it because of whatever reason, the economy, because of this or because of that. And so land becomes less and less attractive. And so I got caught up in the hype of how much these pieces of land were going up, and I bought one, and then I was stuck with it as it went back down during the recession. And that was a big learning lesson, is that I bought land in an area as well that I couldn't convert it into cash flow. Like, it was in an organized, gated community. So it's not like I could have said, okay, well, let's shift and let's lease the land out, or I couldn't do anything. I was just stuck. And so I also had a lack of control because of an owners association. It was in a gated community. Otherwise, I would have just stuck a trailer on there and rented it out on Airbnb because it was near the coast, but I couldn't. And so there was a lot of lessons in that that I learned.
I appreciate you sharing that. I'm also understanding now why you don't like these associations. So we just did a great interview with Tina Larson about understanding co-ops, condo associations, and HOAs. So we should link to that for the show notes there if you don't want to be in those situations and figure out how to navigate it. Some great insights there. All right, give me a digital or mobile resource you recommend for your business.
Digital or mobile resource? Wow. Okay. I think that it depends on what you're doing, but I'll just mention one that I shared with someone yesterday that they really loved. And this person was getting more and more involved on the short-term rental market, and they were expanding their portfolio. And so I introduced them to the resource called AirDNA. AirDNA does all kinds of deep demographic research and research on short-term rental market, including Airbnb and all of those, where you can look and see what the projections will be in terms of what kind of rent you might be getting, what the competitors in that market are getting, what the legislative risks are. So, if it looks like the legislation is leaning in a way where they're going to make short-term rentals illegal in that area, they weigh a lot of that stuff. And so it's been a really cool resource. I know with my multifamily, I did convert a few of the units to short-term rentals, or a lot of more mid-term rentals. We were doing monthly furnished rentals, but it's a great resource for that.
All right, AirDNA it is. Give me the book you've recommended or gifted the most in the last year.
Oh man, that's a good one. Oh my gosh, the name just like literally, I want to say it's called The Giver.
The Go-Giver?
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
The Go-Giver. I love that book. I love the way it's written as a story, similar to the book, decades ago, Rich Dad, Poor Dad, that's written as a story. But it's written as a story, and there's so many powerful concepts in there about business and life. And so I've really loved that book. I think it speaks to people no matter what you're doing with your life. So that's a cool one.
Yeah, I'm a big fan of that book as well. Great read there. All right, give me your daily habit. So I'm gonna say it again. Give me a daily habit that helps you stay focused on your goals.
A daily habit that I'm working on right now is actually giving back to others. So that's why I'm on this podcast. I am trying to cultivate a regular rhythm of me just sharing some of my story, some of what I've learned, anything that could be of value to someone else, and doing it in a way where there's really no strings attached. Like I can just share some of this and hopefully it helps someone. I'm trying to just get in a regular habit of not just being caught up in what I'm trying to accomplish in my world, and just giving to others whatever I can contribute.
Give me your number one insight for, I'm going to say, scaling a portfolio, especially out of market.
Yeah. Scaling a portfolio. I've discovered that if you can go larger, it can be actually easier. Now, with that, you want to have the experience on the team, whether that's your experience or you have another team member that's really experienced. Because if you go larger and you make mistakes, they can also be more painful. But with going larger with your portfolio, for example, I had multifamily that were, let's say between 50 and 75 units. Those buildings, if that was the only building I had in a city, the budget coming in was not enough to hire really talented full-time people. So I had a part-time maintenance person, and that kind of hurts when you have a part-time maintenance person. It's just difficult to manage. It's great if you could get north in some of these locations of 100 units or more, because you'll get a budget coming in where you can hire full-time maintenance, full-time management, and you can hire talent. And you can hire people that are focused only on your property, not spread out among 50 other properties, and you're just one of the ones they're using to make money. So I really like that. I like with scaling to go with larger, but also larger, of course, like we said earlier, in quality locations where you can add value.
Yeah, I love it. All right, so let's lighten the mood. You are out there on the West Coast. Are you still near Santa Monica, or where exactly are you at now?
No, I'm in Santa Barbara, California.
Santa Barbara now. All right.
And yeah, it's a beautiful place to be.
So Santa Barbara, give me your favorite place to grab a bite to eat.
Wow. I think one of my favorites is fish and chips. Well, it's a seafood place, but I get the fish and chips, and it's a place called Brophy Brothers, and it's in the harbor, and it's second story. So you go up these stairs and you can sit at the bar and you look out, and the windows are literally open, the sea air is blowing in, and you look over the harbor, all the boats are there, and it's a cool harbor. It's like there's yachts and there's fishermen, commercial fishermen. And so it's like this really busy, interesting harbor. You can watch the sunset, and the fish and chips is fantastic.
All right, sounds like a good option if you are out there in Santa Barbara. Listen, you gave us a lot of great insights, Alan. You talked about, really your transition from, scrapping it up, getting your experience being a resident manager, taking over more properties, living rent free, getting your first investment, that fixer upper, and then 1031 exchanging that into a larger portfolio across the country, starting in Tulsa, ultimately investing in multiple places throughout the Midwest. We also talked about, speaking and going on, different events, speaking for different stages, different, Keller Williams and some of these different platforms that you were a part of. And really just understanding how important it is for you to educate people and to be able to give back, and how giving back is so important for you. For folks who want to learn more, again, they can go to retireonincome.com, and they can catch you on YouTube and some of the other social media channels at Al Siebes, ALSIEBS. Alan, I want to thank you again for being a great guest and coming on Multifamily Insights. We look forward to staying in touch with you, and I hope you have a great day.
Thanks, you too.